As explained to us in version 1.0, the disaster known as the Lament caused great disasters throughout the world without exception. In the midst of this disaster, different tribes living in an unknown archipelago suffered the consequences of this catastrophe, losing homes and loved ones. For this reason, the Physalia family, who were very good sailors, built a fleet of ships known as the Ark and decided to flee the islands to escape the disaster. However, the sea was very dangerous and turbulent due to the whaling, and many of the ships in the fleet sank and were lost at sea, while the survivors sailed aimlessly in the middle of a sea where sunlight barely reached. In the midst of this situation, the sailors heard a divine voice speaking to them, which guided them by the light of a lighthouse to some islands where they would be safe. This is how the sailors, with the Physalia family at the head, managed to reach the archipelago of the 1,000 Islands, which years later would be known as Rinascita. After reaching dry land, the divinity that guided the sailors gave them wisdom through a device known as the Genesis Nexus, which allows echoes to coexist in peace with humans and to survive without the need for specific terminals. Thanks to this knowledge granted by the divinity, the sailors managed to build buildings and develop the city, and in gratitude to the divinity they built statues and altars to venerate it. They also created what is known as Carnevale, a festival in which people wore costumes and masks to represent the culture and totems of the place they came from, and used different tribal languages to communicate, which allowed, throughout over the years, the different tribes that had escaped from the archipelago because of the lament could understand each other and communicate. This celebration was created by the inhabitants of the 1,000 Islands as a tribute to those loved ones and people who had disappeared in mourning. However, not everything was rosy in those times of the 1,000 Islands. In those times, the divinity, which was previously one, divided into two for reasons that are still unknown, one part in the shape of a winged horse that ruled in the heavens, and the other in the shape of a giant fish that ruled in the seas. The fact that there are two divinities caused believers to face each other in countless battles in the name of the divinity in which they believed. As a result of these countless battles, the divinity was wounded and blood came out of his body, causing great corruption, which generated the disaster known as Dark Tide. During the Dark Tide, sea levels rose, great storms appeared, and tacit discords appeared everywhere. This whole disaster caused the destruction of a large part of Rinascita, but when everything seemed lost, a man appeared to save the situation. A man named Napoli faced the Dark Tide. Legend says that his hair turned white and his eyes were like fire. Napoli was given a lantern, which he raised high, and the tacit discords knelt before him. Then Napoli spoke to the people and said that he had a vision of the divinity on his throne, and he could see that he had half the body of a horse, which ordered him to raise the lantern and pray to grant victory to men. Then Napoli, guided by divinity, put an end to the Dark Tide disasters and founded the Order of the Deep to help rebuild the nation, and Napoli became known as the first primus of the order. Years later, Napoli was on the verge of death. Some say he was called by the sentinel to be at his side. Before dying, Napoli explained that the divinity, who once was one, had chosen her herald, and on the promised day, the maiden crowned with the golden laurel will commune with the divinity and emerge as the enlightened one, ending the males of Rinascita, and divinity will return to its true form. Years after Napoli's death, Ragusa was led by the Blessed Maiden. The Blessed Maiden promoted all kinds of celebrations during Carnival. She even took note of the criticism she received to improve the city as much as possible. However, a new disaster was approaching Ragusa. The Ariosonda phenomenon known as the Dark Tide once again threatened Rinascita. To avoid a new catastrophe, the Blessed Maiden sacrifices herself and gave her life to stop the second Dark Tide, thus becoming the Martyr Maiden. After his death, the current Primus Fenrico assumed the position of Primus of the Order. The new Primus, contrary to the wishes of the Maiden and the people themselves, implemented prohibitions for the carnival and took extreme measures against anyone who, according to the Order, offended the Sentinel's faith and were considered heretics. 10 years before the current events during Carnival, a new catastrophic event occurred, in which the tacit discords got out of control. A giant beast from the sea created immense waves and a dragon flew above. In the middle of all this, the Primus Fenrico appeared and put an end to the problem, thus being the supposed hero of the day. After this, Fenrico prohibited the celebration of Carnival, which was not celebrated for 10 years. However, it is still not known for sure who the sentinel is or what his true form is. In the documents found on the map, we can find a letter written by a member of the Physalia. This member explains how the Physalia built the ark to reach the Thousand Islands and how the family was the original government of these lands. In his letter, Physalia explains that many of the islanders, when they embarked, saw a being in the shape of a giant fish, which guided them and took care of them. This giant fish began to perform a series of acts that people considered miracles, so the people began to worship it as divinity. However, he also tells us that when the family began to investigate, the miracles performed by this giant fish were very different from the miracles performed by the divinity in which they believed. He also tells that people began to have dreams with the supposed divinity. He even says that he himself had dreams about that creature. The Physalia explains that after the death of Napoli, a new primus was named, but the doctrines launched by the acolytes were contaminated and everything related to the old divinity began to be corrupted, as if history were being rewritten. Another curiosity is that in Ragusa we can talk to a member of the Black Shores, who tells us that the sentinel statues do not coincide with the information in the Tethys system, so the Ragunas may be worshipping a being that not be the true sentinel. Furthermore, when the carnival ends, we hear the voice of the sentinel who tells us that he is trapped, and that we should look for an inverted tower in the middle of the heavens. We can see that tower on the map, and probably in the next versions we will be able to go there. And finally, another curiosity is that at the end of the Doors event, the white cat tells us that something dark is hiding under the sea. If we go to the part of the Thorn Crown Towers, under the floor of the holograms, we can see that there are 2 fish swimming under the platform. This could be related to the giant fish deity, or maybe not, but it is curious that it is in the same area where the head of the Physalia family lives, who lives in Bottiveleno Castle near the area where the mysterious fish are. And well people, that's it for the video of lore and theories. I hope you enjoyed it. Thank you very much for watching.